Thank you all again for joining us. Again, my name is Elizabeth Maris, Beth Maris. I'm the supervising attorney here at POTS. I supervise the legal team, and we, as I hope most of you know, work with community residents in the Bronx who have housing or income instability or who are potentially facing eviction. And I really appreciate you joining us. I want to apologize in advance for the format. We are all doing our best to connect with each other during these really difficult times. And it is an artificial setting, but we so appreciate you joining us and being part of our community. So we are going to get started. Hold on one second. Okay, I apologize. I'm supposed to have access to the slide, which I think I do, but give me 1 second. All right, I apologize. I'm going to need some help advancing the slides. Thank you so much. So we are going to cover a brief introduction to POTS, as well as an update on housing court and some advice that we'd like tenants to be aware of and some resources at the end. Hopefully, those of you who are here are familiar with POTS, but we wanted to just start out by, again, welcoming you all to this virtual forum. A reminder of what our mission, vision, and values are. And I'm not going to read the entire thing, but just to understand that we are here for community members. Our mission is to be a loving community in the Bronx that nourishes the basic needs and hungers of all who come to our doors. And we're going to share a little bit more about our specific services. We offer a variety of comprehensive and personalized services that are designed to fight poverty and hunger in the Bronx. Those services are organized in 3 programmatic pillars: dignity and wellness, food security, and long-term stability. And the work we do as part of our legal team and our case management team and our employment team are all part of our long-term stability. Many people know us for our food security programs and our dignity and wellness programs, which are also a very, very important part of the services that we want to make available to community members. We introduced ourselves earlier, but these are the names of the current legal team members. Again, really happy to see you all here today. And we're going to go into a brief introduction to housing court. And we just want to try to dispel some of the uncertainty about the operations of housing court. So those of us who have lived through the pandemic here in New York City know that we've gone through various phases of court operations and access and restrictions on operations. And those limitations and restrictions that we're seeing with access to the court system, we're also experiencing in our own workplaces and probably in our own homes. So we just wanted to clarify the current status of housing court operations. Housing court is open. It is open for in-person visits at this point. However, that access may be limited. And all users are being encouraged to access the court by other means other than in person if possible. So people are being encouraged to call in, to connect to court conferences through an application called Microsoft Teams. And if they are coming in person, there will be a health screening when you enter the building. There may be some limitations or delays in getting to where you want to go. But we do want to make sure everyone knows that you do have the right to enter the court. You do have the right to seek information, to file papers, to access the services that are available, but that you should anticipate that there's going to be some limitations and potentially some delays in how you can do that. The exception that I want to make to that previous slide, is that there is a separate building at 851 Grand Concourse where part of the housing court is located, including a part that's dedicated to public housing tenants who are facing eviction proceedings. The public housing part has not been operating in the same way. We do expect that it will be opening in the future. We don't know exactly those details. And if you can go to the next slide, please, there's a statement taken from NYSCEF's website, which is just an explanation. The New York City Housing Authority which administers public housing cases, has discontinued many cases during the pandemic. It's also made the statement publicly that it will not bring cases against households where a senior citizen is the head of household or where the household has applied for ERAP and that application is pending. So you may not see that many cases. NYCHA is trying to work with residents, and people can still access supports if they're in arrears or they need rent adjustments. Those things should all be available to public housing tenants. And we want people to understand that even though housing court is open, housing court has changed. And if you visited housing court before the pandemic, you probably experienced something which is not very similar to what you would see if you enter the building today. So we used to see long lines of people trying to enter the building in the morning or whatever time of the day. Inside the building, it was very crowded. It was very noisy. It could be confusing to figure out where to go. And currently the building is very empty if you were to visit it in person. So there are many courtrooms where you will only see court personnel if you were to go in person. There are some courtrooms that are closed on various days. And the court is encouraging everyone to participate in any conferences through a platform called Microsoft Teams, which is a video platform. We're going to show some examples a little bit further in this presentation of what happens when you are invited to participate by Teams, but we want everyone to know that court is open, but it is operating differently. And we also just want to acknowledge that things have changed aside from how court is operating, how our workplaces are operating, what we're experiencing at home and in school. The circumstances of our community has changed in a huge way during this time. Many of us have been ill, we've lost or had family members who were experiencing health challenges. And aside from health challenges and having fear for our own safety and health and those of our loved ones, there's been a tremendous loss of income and a tremendous disruption in our communities. And there's many things that have changed in order to try to meet those changing needs, but we just want to acknowledge that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and we want to be sensitive and mindful of those challenges and make sure that we're operating in a way which is comfortable for us and safe for everyone that we're interacting with. And despite, as we said before, the court is open. When the court was open to fully in-person services, there were a number of services that were available on site at the courthouse. Those services, with one exception, are no longer available on site. So Housing Court Answers has returned to the courthouse in the Bronx. The information table, which you all may be familiar with, is operating on a more limited schedule than before, but it is operating in the Bronx on the first floor near the elevator bank, past the clerk's office. Other than Housing Court Answers, though, the other providers that had space in the courthouse before the pandemic do not have that office space right now. So you may remember Homebase was in the basement, HRA had an office on the second floor, and some of the legal services providers had offices throughout the building. They have not returned to those spaces. So, but even though they have not returned, they are still available, they are still operating, they are still providing services. And those services are being accessed in a different way. So just like court was operating in an in-person way in the past, many legal services providers and social service providers used to access or offer their services in person. And they are now, many offices are relying on phone access, on computer access, and if they are doing in-person contact, they're going to do it in a way which is necessary to maintain their own health and that of their community members. So for example, the Housing Help Center, this is a center which is on the second floor in the Bronx. If you go there in person, the door is closed and locked. And if you go on the court's website, it explains that they are open. However, they can only be accessed by phone. So that's just one example of how to access a service. The service is still there, but you're going to need to connect with them in a different way. And similarly for home-based offices, many home-based offices are not accepting people in person at their locations. They are asking that people call first. They're going to try to conduct their services through phone outreach. There may be exceptions. That's really up to the different providers, but just please know that if you go someplace in person, you may not have the same access that you might have had in the past. And the best step is to call first and to make sure that you're following instructions on how best to access those services. So just as a reminder, we are here, other providers are here, we are working. Some of us are working harder than ever, trying to figure out how to be creative and how to connect with and to anticipate the needs of the community. You know, everyone is under stress and strain during this time. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty and fear, even now after living through the pandemic for 2 years. But we are here and we want to connect with you, and we want you to know that despite the challenges you might encounter as you're working through trying to connect to these various services, that there's someone on the other side who wants to meet you and wants to help you. So just please keep that in mind. And I believe Maeve Kellig is going to take over from this point in the presentation.
That is correct. Thank you, Beth. So now that we have explained a bit about the changes in housing court and in our communities in general, which is a point very well taken, Beth, and I'm glad that you addressed those things that we've all experienced. So now we're turning to tips for tenants who may or may not be in court, and hopefully answer any questions about the process. So one of the main questions is there a case in court? And as the legal team, we always want to know if you have already been to court, if you have a court date. And so during the pandemic, especially, it can be hard to tell because many cases, as you know, were put on hold for an extended period of time without the court giving you a next date to come back. So we want to focus on if you got a petition with an index number, which is this document here. You can see that it says petition to recover real property, and it's a non-payment, so those things are all the way to the right. And then if you received a notice from the court with a date and a time to appear, that's also an indication that you have an active case in court. And if you're not sure, we would really recommend that you call housing court, which is at this number, the 718-466-3000, or you can search by index number or name on these two websites from the court system. And we'll go into detail more on that. Just give me 1 second. So one of the tips that we want to give you is that not all cases will appear on, we pronounce this as NYSCEF. It's the New York State like electronic filing system through the courts. And so basically that it started during the pandemic to really be used more often. So if your case was filed more recently, it's most likely going to be here. But again, no, it's not guaranteed. And then some older cases that have been put back on the calendar in court have also been put into this system. But we just want to make it clear that even if you do not see your name or your case number on this website, it doesn't mean that it's not still active. That's a lot of negatives. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's not entirely reliable whether or not it's in this website. And then, so in order to search on NYSCEF, you can search by case number. So on the left here, we circled case identifier. And so you would put in the case number where it's highlighted yellow. So you see that it says LT, which indicates landlord tenant. So that's a housing case. And then in the longer yellow rectangle, you would put the case number. And then in the second one, you would put in the last 2 digits of the year. So probably 19, 20, 2021, 2022. And then choose the Bronx if you're in the Bronx. If not, you would choose your borough. And then on the right side, you can search by name. And so if you're searching by name, you would be clicking party. If you're searching for your own name or a tenant's name, you would click on party and then put in the first and last name. And so, you know, if you do find your case here, it's a great resource because you can see many of the court papers that have been filed with the court and kind of see the history of the case as well. So yeah, if you find your case there, definitely very useful. Then there's a site that you can use, which is Web Civil. Again, not all cases appear here because the cases that are on here, they only show the cases that have a future court date. And so for many of us in the pandemic, if your landlord tried to start a case against you, or if you had one from before March 2020, then there may not be a future court date. And if there's no future court date, it doesn't appear on this website. So really, like, there's the easiest way or the most secure way is probably to go to the court clerk themselves. But we're giving you all these tools to hopefully figure it out, using what applies to you. And so here you can also search by index number and by name. And yeah, so it is super useful. And also you can see former cases, if that ever was of interest to you. And here we also ask you, is there a court case? And then what is the status of the case? So I just want to say that any of these notices is alarming and is definitely cause for concern. However, not all of them indicate an active case in court. So here on the left, not active in court is a 5-day late rent notice and a 14-day rent demand. We're going to show you pictures of those so you can become familiar with what they look like. And then for active in court, we have, if you've gotten a notice of petition and petition, if your case was already in court before the pandemic, so before March 2020, and it was never discontinued, then it's still active. And if you get a letter about a court date, it is an active case. And of course, if you unfortunately get a marshal's notice of eviction, you know that you have an active case. And so here we have some sample court papers. Here's the petition and notice of petition. And so I guess I wanted to go in a little bit about what you're supposed to do, or ideally what you would be doing if you, sorry, one second. Yeah. So we showed a sample petition in an earlier slide. So this would show how the landlord officially starts a case with the court. And here, I'm not sure how much you can see of the writing here, but there are all these paragraphs. And in each one, it alleges something, the landlord is claiming something about the tenancy. So usually the first paragraph says that the landlord owns the apartment. The second one says that that the tenant lives here with a lease that started at this date, ends this date with this amount of rent, and things like that. So we recommend that you read this, if you can, very carefully. And if you're unable to, hopefully go to someone who can assist you in understanding what it says, because it is very important. This is the basis of the case that the landlord is bringing against you. And then these are some sample pre-court papers. Again, this is what I was talking about earlier, which these are not these do not indicate an active case, but they do indicate that your landlord is claiming that you owe rent and is requesting that you pay it either within 5 days, as you can see in the last paragraph of the 5-day notice, that the constitute a reminder and request to pay this sum to the landlord within 5 days of the date hereof. And then the 14-day notice, essentially the same. It's breaking down by month what the landlord is claiming that you owe and requesting that you pay it within 14 days. And this can be the paper that you get right before the petition and notice of petition. But these notices in themselves do not mean that you have to go directly to court. Then here is a sample court date notice. So here it kind of, it gives you the date and the time. And then here we highlighted in the orange box how you can participate in court. So you can type in the link that they give you if you have access to a computer with a microphone and a camera and all those things. Or you can call in using the phone number to go into just be able to on audio to participate in the conference. And if neither of those options is available to you, then you can appear in person. But they do note that you should go alone and you should not arrive more than 15 minutes before your court time. And then if you have questions, please call that number below that goes to housing court. And so I guess I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but this is important. What should I do when I get a petition? Definitely read the entire document carefully. It would be good to check the dates that the landlord is alleging. If they're saying that your lease expired months before it actually did, that means that you could have a defense based on that. If they're claiming that your monthly rent is $2,000 when really it's $1,400, that's another defense that you could have, that they're claiming more, that you owe more than you actually do legally. And after that, we would recommend that you obtain legal help if possible. We're going to be including a lot of resources for tenants near the end of this presentation. So, but yeah, along the way in everything in this process, we would recommend that you reach out and get legal assistance or a lawyer to represent you if possible. And then the third and really important thing is to answer the petition within 10 days. And so you would call the clerk's office and give them the index number, so the number at the top of the petition on the right, to answer by phone. Or you can go to the clerk's window on the first floor of housing court to do an answer in person. And the answer is your chance as a tenant to give the clerk any defenses you have had, whether it's that you had a financial hardship during the pandemic, as so many people have, or if you've applied for ERAP and your application is still pending. So this is a sample answer. So basically, we recommend that just as the petition had all these paragraphs where the landlord is alleging something about the tenant, the answer is where the tenant gets to respond to each of those things and also give their own claims about defenses and counterclaims. And so here, again, it may be difficult to read for some of you. I'm sorry about that. But the first section is service, and there's the lines 1 and 2. And service is about how you get the papers. So the clerk may ask you, how did you get the petition? And maybe you didn't get one. So you would say that, and that could be improper service. Maybe it was left in the lobby of your building versus being sent to you certified mail and then taped to your door. All those things are very important facts when you're going to answer. So we just recommend that you take your time and go question by question to check off everything that applies to you. Again, rent, the rent section starts with the little line number 5. So put in any dispute that you have. If the landlord never actually told you that you owed rent before you got the petition, if you have Section 8 and they're demanding the whole monthly rent from you, that's a problem. And then under apartment/house, that's where you can claim your defenses that, like, for example, your apartment has conditions in it, leaks, broken tiles that the landlord has failed to repair. And I'm not sure if these are universally included, but numbers 13 and 14 under pandemic emergency, those are 2 categories that you may be able to check off just as like an extra protection for people during this time when people are in extra need. So yes, so how to participate in court. I mean, read the court notices for instructions. Usually they do tell you enough information at least to give you a phone number if you can't figure it out yourself. Look up the case online to confirm the date and time. Call the court if you have any questions. And then your options are to appear on video for your court date, call into the court date, or appear in person if you need to. So again, this is the sample court date notice, and they do outline these options. However, at an earlier point, I believe in the letter or in general, people are discouraged from going in person, but It's more just that they want to limit the amount of people there. It's not that you're not allowed to participate in your own case in person. And this is a big question. What if I miss my court date? So you would call the housing court clerk as soon as possible with your index number. You would file an answer if you haven't done so already. And when you're on the phone with the housing court clerk, you would ask what happened on that court date and what you should do next. And then you should definitely go to court to submit an order to show cause and include, so you have to include both an explanation and a defense. So some of you may be familiar with an order to show cause if you've been in housing court earlier, if you've been practicing in housing law. So the tenant gets the chance to file this and get their case put back on the calendar after missing a court date. And so you would just need both those things, like I didn't get the letter in time, I was sick, my family member was sick and I was caring for them, and that there's a defense to the case, that they're suing me for the wrong amount of rent, there are repairs in my apartment, I have an ERAP application, things like that. So what do I do if I get a notice of eviction? I would like everyone to just take a careful look at this, because this is a notice of eviction. There are many, as we've gone through court papers before, that indicate that your case is active and things are happening, but this is the one that is the marshal's notice of eviction. So this is what a tenant has to receive before they can be evicted. A letter from your landlord saying that you owe rent, or a petition are not notices of eviction. And here you'll see the dates at the bottom that show the date of the notice and the first possible date of eviction. So similar to the last slide about missing your court date, if you get this notice, then you have to do an order to show cause. And basically that will include why you failed to pay the back rent or failed to satisfy the judgment against you on time, and also your defenses to the case in general. If you receive a marshal's notice of eviction, you'll see here in our bullet points at each step, we recommend that you try to get legal advice or legal representation, and that's why it continues to appear. If you already have an attorney when you get this notice, they have to file the order to show cause for you, so please let them know as soon as possible. And if you don't already have a lawyer, then you should go do your order to show cause as soon as possible and then get an attorney. And overall, just you have to participate in your case and take these steps in order to pause the eviction and hopefully stop it altogether and be able to remain in your home. And so just to sum up, we tried to give you like overall what are the points we wanted to hit. The do's here are always ask for help. There is a lot of help out there available. A lot of organizations like ours, like Housing Court Answers, like the court itself, they are just around, and we've changed to serve clients and tenants better. Of course, apply for ERAP and other rent arrears assistance. These are great resources that have been given to us by the state and the city. And so we definitely encourage you to apply for those things, get a free lawyer, and participate in court. The don'ts over here, don't ignore court or legal notices. Definitely don't miss a court date if you can avoid it, and don't move out of your apartment without getting legal advice. So that last item, I can think of 2 clients off the top of my head that I've worked with in the past 6 months that have left their apartment just because the landlord told them to. And you know, however angry your landlord is and however unpleasant it is, you have the legal right to stay in your apartment unless and until you get a marshal's notice of eviction. And so even as people are overwhelmed and struggling to pay rent, we would definitely encourage you to maintain your legal rights to stay in your apartment. And And then there are some more protections for tenants. Tenants with a pending ERAP application are protected from eviction. And if a tenant had a financial hardship during the pandemic, they may be protected from eviction under the Tenant Safe Harbor Act. As you may be aware, there are a lot of kind of overlapping acts and regulations and protections for tenants that have been enacted. So if you have a specific question about your situation, we're definitely available, and we'll be giving out our emails at the end. But you should always claim that as a defense, that you had a financial hardship. And then additional protections for tenants. Tenants have the right to free legal representation. Landlords and owners cannot use self-help, as it's called, meaning they can't evict their tenants on their own. And that evictions can only be done legally by when it's been approved by the court and a marshal's notice has been served. And we keep encouraging you to get legal help. And these are some of the resources to obtain that help. So some of them will give you immediate information and guidance and advice. And some of them will kind of start the process to hopefully getting a free attorney. So if you need advice or information right away, we would recommend calling 311 and asking for the tenant helpline. Definitely Housing Court Answers. If you want to be referred directly to an attorney, you would call for a free lawyer, which is the Right to Counsel program at that phone number. Ask the judge to refer you to the Office of Civil Justice, or you can email the Office of Civil Justice on your own. And then, yeah, so I'm going to pass it back to Beth. Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve. I just wanted to say one more thing about the right to counsel and accessing an attorney. As Maeve was sharing, there's many, many cases that were filed that did not proceed in court immediately. And so they're kind of in a on pause or in a holding pattern. And all of those tenants are potentially eligible for an attorney. However, you're most likely to be assigned an attorney when your case is active. So don't be frustrated if you call and you don't immediately get assigned an attorney. Just know that you will have an opportunity before your case progresses to be assigned to an attorney. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. Don't give up. So some of the court parts that are happening, for example, you may get a calendar notice to appear in a conference, and at that conference, there may be an attorney who's in that space, either virtually or in person potentially, who's available to connect with you to potentially offer you legal representation. But even if you don't have an attorney at your conference, you can still ask for it, and you should ask for it until you get it. There are a lot of resources on eviction protections and eviction prevention during the pandemic. These are just a couple that kind of summarize available resources. And I encourage everyone to get as much information as they possibly can, just understanding that each person's situation is also unique, and you're going to also want particular advice that's specific to your facts. All right, I saw that we're going to get to the questions in the chat when we finish, but I know there's some questions about ERAP. So hopefully everyone knows what ERAP is. It's the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that was started in New York State based on funding that was allocated by the federal government. It was a large amount, or it seemed to be a large amount of money when it was awarded, and that program started June 1st, 2021. We all, I believe all the advocates on this call, on this meeting, spent a lot of time trying to assist tenants in applying for ERAP. And those applications, many of them are still pending, even for people who applied right after the program opened. If anyone had a subsidy, meaning their rent was set at a level considered to be affordable, those applicants, many of those applicants didn't get their applications processed. There are others who may have applied after the start date of the program who may not have an answer yet. And this is just a clue that there is a special way that you can check an ERAP status. To do that, you need your application number, you need your date of birth, and you can do it at this page here. You can also call OTDA, which is the State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, and you can ask them. And I found those representatives to be very, very helpful. Just another word on ERAP before we get to new applications. There are many people who you may check that last page and find out the status of your application. It may say that it's pending or that it's under review. It may also say that it was approved pending payment. That means you're going to want to call OTDA to find out and get the details of that approval. We had many, many clients that we worked with who did not get written notification of the approval. Also, you may find that the application was denied, and we also have many clients who did not get a written notification of a denial. So our advice in that situation is to call OTDA right away. You can submit, the way you appeal a denial is to call. You can do it online as well, but we've encouraged people to call. And when you make that call, you can do it with an advocate if you have one, to explain what happened and why you believe the denial was incorrect. And just make sure if you give an email address, for example, that you're checking your email. And if you're not getting your email anymore, you want to make sure to make those phone calls so that you know what the status of your application is. So there are many people who have appeals that are pending, and we hope those people are going to be approved. We understand that the state is saying they don't have enough funds for all the current applicants for ERAP. Even if that is true, we remain hopeful that additional funds may be allocated to the program. And the state was sued when they closed the program, saying that they had exhausted funds. And so they have reopened the program. And if we look at the next slide, you can still submit a new application for ERAP at this time if you have not yet applied for ERAP. So when you do that, you may see on the website that they don't have additional funds and that they're likely to deny your application. Do not be deterred. You should still file an application if you are eligible for two reasons. One, it is possible it'll be approved and you'll receive the assistance that you need in order to get out of arrears. But secondly, when there's a pending ERAP application, the tenant is protected from an eviction case being brought or that case moving forward and protected from eviction. So if you're eligible for ERAP and you have not yet applied, we encourage you to do so. There are resources from some groups. Some of these groups have representatives here as part of our meeting today. And NYCA and BronxWorks were both receive funding to assist tenants applying for ERAP and to help with troubleshooting for problems with those applications. So we provided some specific resources related to those two organizations. And there's also a lot of other resources out there. So we've spoken a little bit about HRA. HRA is the City Department of Social Services, the Human Resources Administration. They are the entity for the city government that would evaluate emergency applications for rent arrears that are not ERAP. So ERAP is run by the state. One-shot deal will be run by HRA, and you do have the right to apply for a one-shot deal. At a certain point in time when ERAP was active, HRA was not considering one-shot deal applications. Our understanding is they now are considering one-shot deal applications. They may ask applicants what if they applied for ERAP and what happened to that application, but you are able to apply for a one-shot deal. For home base, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. We recommend calling 311 if you don't know which office applies to you, and then to call that individual office to find out about how to connect with them for an appointment and for assistance. Housing court answers we're going to hear more from in a few minutes. And then there's many groups that are that have private funds that are potentially available to tenants who are facing emergency. The next number is if you are a rent stabilized tenant, this is the number that you can reach out to get a copy of the rent history for your apartment. And we do recommend this for all rent stabilized tenants. So you can take a look at the history to make sure the landlord has properly registered the rent and to see if there's any questionable increases in rent that might mean that you have a possible rent overcharge. And if you do, you're going to want to connect with an attorney in order to evaluate that possibility. We want to remind anyone who has Section 8, that just like many of the providers that we've spoken about so far, the Section 8 offices are also largely operating remotely, which means that when you have to do a recertification or get an adjustment, those things could be more challenging because of having to go through remote access. So any agency should be giving you a notice that says how to connect with them and how to submit information. And they should also be open for in-person if needed, if you can't access those remote possibilities. And as a reminder, we have a legal clinic here at POTS, and this is our general email address and phone number if you're seeking to access our services. And I think we're about to close our part of the presentation. In the next slide, just as a reminder of how to connect with us, we have a lot more information about POTS on our website. And just a reminder that we have other services as well as the legal team services. And I just want to close there, and we're going to transition to a presentation from Housing Court Answers. And then we'll leave time for questions at the end.
Could you start on the first slide?
Can you introduce yourself again so that everyone knows who's speaking, please?
No, I was just trying to get the Hi,
Perfect.
everybody. Good afternoon again. My name is Marlene Casanova, and I'm the Bronx coordinator for Housing Court Answers. I'm going to tell you a brief of what we do now during COVID and before COVID. So who we are. Housing Court Answers is a nonprofit organization that assists unrepresented tenants and homeowners in New York City Housing Court. We explain housing court and tenants' rights. The services that we provide are by connecting tenants to free lawyers, helping tenants access the rent arrears assistance, helping unrepresented tenants and homeowners navigate housing court procedures, explain the moratorium, COVID-related rent assistance and other programs, and also explain how to get repairs if tenant needs repairs in their apartment or houses. Our hotline, we have Spanish speakers, French, Bengali, and we also have access to interpretation if the person speak like Russian or other language that we don't have it in our Housing Court Answers with us at the moment. Our number is 212-962-4795, and we open Monday through Fridays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We are open in the Bronx and Queens. I'm the one in Bronx helping tenants to file the
I lost practically.
I'm sorry?
No, you can continue.
Okay, sorry. So I'm the one in the Bronx helping tenants file order to show cause, connect them to attorney, file HB actions, help roommates file licensee holdover or regular holdovers against the roommates. My coworkers is on Wednesday and Thursday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm sorry, I'm from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Tuesdays through Thursday and some Fridays sometimes.